Do you want to maybe open with a quick introduction, Thea, of the section that you're going to take us through, and then I can dive into a quick overview of Nuvo. There are probably a lot
Okay.
of people on the line who haven't heard of us before, so I've got a couple of slides to take us through, just to paint a bit of a picture of who we are and what we do as well.
Okay. Well, thank you all for having me. My name is Thea Dudley. I have spent the last 4 decades in credit management in the building material and construction industry. Started out with my dad on a construction site, really hated any type of manual labor, and I didn't want to get dirty. And I was 16 and did not want to spend time walking around a dusty job site. So I learned that if you move into the office and you control the money, you're really more in a power seat. So I have done credit and collections in our industry going on those 4 decades. I was tapped by Dave to, hey, let's walk through some credit application fun and information. And I'm going to walk you guys through what that process looks like, and maybe some things to help refresh, or maybe some new nuggets to take away.
Hey, thanks, Thea. I'm David Fulham. For those of you that haven't met, I see a few familiar faces in the attendee list here. I'm with Nuvo, so I've been with the company for a couple of years, and essentially what we do is we offer a trade credit management platform, which suppliers, distributors, manufacturers can use to do what we call turning trade credit into a competitive advantage. So essentially, we see the credit department as an oft unloved function that's kind of had this tough role of protecting the business while also enabling growth, which is kind of a contradictory position to be in. And so we've built a suite of tools to make that a simpler, easier process for teams. So there are 3 workflows to Nuvo. We have an online credit application, which takes the PDF form or the unconnected web form and turns it into a connected digital experience that is customizable, which very flexible for taking on credit card customers, COD, net terms businesses. It's verified, so we actually plug into sources like the IRS. We validate emails for deliverability before they ever enter your system, so you always know you're going to get that first invoice delivered to the right inbox right on time. And it's also collaborative, so your entire customer organization can work together to move through the application. Thea was sharing some statistics with me before we jumped on the call that apparently it takes on average 6 people within an organization to approve a credit application. It probably takes just about as many to submit one as well. So having a shared space where the owner, the officer can actually submit the right information that they control into the application is actually very helpful for getting through that process and making it easy on those customers. We also have a risk assessment platform. And so what we do here is we actually pull in key insights from bureaus. We actually make direct connections with banks. So we have an integration to 12,000 North American banks, which lets buyers connect their own business bank accounts to our platform and then provide suppliers who use the solution instant visibility into rolling cash positions or non-sufficient funds notices. The idea is that we actually can help you extend more credit by creating greater visibility into customers who otherwise might have a very thin credit profile and find it difficult to actually demonstrate that they are credit worthy. And that turns this into a click experience rather than a data gathering exercise, which can take a lot of labor time and actually slow up your sales cycle as well. Part of the magic of Nuvo is that we actually will continually refresh those insights for the life of the relationship that you have with a buyer. So what that means is that rather than conducting at best a credit review every 12 months, our customers are essentially doing the same thing every month for the life of the relationship. So we will stack rank by the magnitude of change, every shift in those key metrics, and give you visibility into those customers who are seeing improved risk scores, or maybe you're getting a bit of a contraction and you'll want to think about reducing exposure, bringing in unpaid invoices, and maybe lowering your credit limit as well. So we're going to dive into the credit application process with Thea in great detail, but Typically, this is how we look at the high-level process. So essentially, there's a processing step where information is received, it's triaged with a customer. Teams are spending a lot of time chasing down static insights, whether it's calling a bank manager, maybe it's chasing a trade reference across multiple days. And once these credit applications start to stack up, that workload and task management step can actually get really onerous. And then with those static insights, the approval and onboarding step is more work. So entering that PDF application into the ERP, assessing insights, and also trying to compare between customers is quite challenging. So credit teams, according to the National Association of Credit Managers, are spending about 60 hours to get through an approval. Does that resonate with people on the line as to the process and the amount of effort that goes into going from an application to an approval?
Do you have everyone muted?
They should have the ability to speak.
Verizon's good.
I'm sorry, I thought that was maybe a rhetorical question.
In some ways it was, Pam.
It is. It's tough.
I'm curious, does that sound a little bit like your process, Pam?
Yeah, sometimes we have to track down their trade representatives, that's for sure. Some people, they never return them, and it does cost time.
Yeah. So ultimately what we try to help customers get to is a credit application that contains information that's verified, they can trust, insights that are available immediately to them, and a deep, rich, and paint a true picture of the credit profile of their customer, and ultimately make a really quick and easy process to approve and onboard and get a customer set up in the ERP and begin taking purchases. So that's the ideal state that we essentially try to help take our customers to once they come through. But that's a quick view of Nuvo. I'll probably pass to you now, Thea, to take us into credit application land.
Well, I'm going to have you, there you go. So my current role is, in addition to speaking, is going into companies in the building and construction industry and looking at their back office processes, particularly that cash flow piece, which is, the credit collections function. I spent 16 years as Vice President of Financial Services with Guardian Building Products and with SRS Distribution, running credit teams across the country. So I got some great opportunity to look at some things that work and don't work. And after you've spent a couple decades in the industry, you do start to pick up some things that you kind of learn by default. So before we jump into all of this, I did want to start from, we're making the leap here that everybody has a credit application. If you don't, okay, reach out, send David an email, and we'll get you at least something to get you started. But hopefully everybody has a credit application. You might not have looked at it in a while, but that's where we're starting from. It's always easier to get information on the front end when you start suing people or when things kind of go off the rails. Suddenly nobody's your friend. So it's much easier for us to do that. If you start with the assumption that everything to do with how you do business with a customer starts and ends with the credit app, it really does give you an insight as to the importance of the document. So if you think about business as a game, think about the credit application as the rules. And it's a legally binding document. So for those of you that doodle on it, please stop doing that. It works against you in court if you start making chicken scratch on it. If you have to, put notes off to the side, put them in the computer. Don't write on your credit application. David, switch.
There we go.
Okay, so we'll talk about this. We're going to be, I'll just have to like finger up or something just so that, we'll get a system going before this is over. So most people's credit application consists of 2 to 3 pages. You've got your front page, which is that information page. And then you've got your terms and conditions and your signature spot and maybe a personal guarantee. I have gone into some companies and seen some that are 5 or 6 pages long, and I think the longest one I ever saw was 17 pages. And I took it back to the hotel, took it back to the hotel with me and read it. And I think by the time I was done reading it, I'm like, I don't know if I even want to work with this company, because it felt like a beatdown. By the time I got done reading it, it was more about what the credit manager was telling you. This is what to expect if you want to buy from us. This is how you're going to behave. And that's really not a healthy way to start your business relationship. Plus, you see something that's that many pages long, I just can't. The only reason I read it was they were paying me. So it's your customer's not going to read that. So we definitely want to make sure as condensed as possible. So we're going to talk about a lot of different pieces of what that looks like, from the aesthetics to the length. But ultimately, when you first start, you want to have some key bits of information on there. And, first and foremost are the things we all look for: legal name. If they have DBAs, I want a physical address and a mailing address. Now it's easy to go out and Google, if they put an address on there. Back in the day, if you wanted to verify the information, you had to get in your car and do a drive-by, which was a very different connotation than it is today. You were cruising by to make sure it wasn't the gas and sip, or the middle of a highway somewhere. You wanted to verify that there really was a physical location there, and then where it was mailing. And then you want phone number, I want email, I want, a website. I'm going to ask for all these. I might not always get them. So especially in a written form, people can skip over stuff. What I like about AI and putting it online is I can make certain fields that I'm really adamant about. I can make it to where they can't skip over. They can't move on until they put something in there. I might not always like what they put in there, because some of it's unkind, but at least they filled it out. And then I want to make sure that I verified everything. And then I want the legal status of the entity. Hit it, Dave. Okay. Most of us understand what the entity likes, and I'm not going to read all of these to you. You guys are sharp. You can read it for yourself, but you want to know what kind of entity you're dealing with, because a sole proprietor is way different than dealing with a corporation and the bits of information I'm going to ask for. Sole proprietor, I'm going to ask for stuff like Social Security. I want their home address, if they have a landline or not, if they're completely off of cell. On partnerships, I'm not a big fan of the partnership. It's rare that you see them executed well. It usually ends up in a little bit of a fist fight, and then you have pieces where somebody's leaving. But you also want to know what kind of partnership it is. Is it a limited liability? Is it just a joint venture? What did they do with that? And then, of course, your corporations. And you want to be able to get that data as well. Hit it, Dave.
I start anticipating these.
I'm glad you guys have a sense of humor about that.
I'm always laughing usually.
Okay, I'm going to hang out with you, because you you drink wine, Sam?
You might get in trouble if you hang out with me too much.
I'm kind of liking that. All right, so legal status. I want to know that legal status so that I can drill into some of the bits. Now, the nice thing about AI is, and what intrigued me about Nuvo was I didn't have to do a lot of this work myself. Back in the day, or in a lot of companies that I work with today, we're still doing it very manually. And so you have to verify. You want to go out onto the Secretary of State. You want to look. It's going to tell me, are they in good standing? Are they even listed? If they're not in good standing, or if there's a problem with it, I can call the company and go, hey, did you know that you're not in good standing? It starts that conversation, and we start moving forward. A lot of times you can get a ton of information from the Secretary of State, including their tax ID or your EIN number. I think Florida is the only one that puts that out there, which, for purposes of collecting, if somebody doesn't pay me and, it goes down a bad road, I'm going to give them a W-9 so that they can realize that as a game for themselves, and the IRS can play with them after that, since they didn't want to play nice in the sandbox with me. Be aware that on the Secretary of State, they may be running behind. It's still a government entity, so they might not always have the information up to date. It might be inaccurate, but it's a good place to start. Dave. Okay, and then knowing who you're doing business with, you know, I want to know all the little bits and pieces that I can possibly find. So I'm going to ask for the owner or some of the partners for their social security, for that information, for home address. I might not be able to do anything for them with a corporation, but if I don't ask and I don't get, or they're not willing to give, I don't know what bits and pieces I'm going to get. Half the time I have a personal guarantee stuck on the credit application and people sign it. I don't know whether they don't understand what they're looking at or whether they just are getting in sign mode, but a lot of times you capture things that if you wouldn't have asked them, you would have never got. And if you just don't make it a big deal, then usually most people fill it out. I definitely want to make sure I get the EIN number, because I think Florida, like I said, is the only state that's doing it. Some others might be putting it out on that Secretary of State, but Florida is the only one that comes to mind. Okay, then a little bit, I want to get a little bit more. I want some historical. I want to know when that the company started. I want to know if they have any state registrations. Most of us sell to contractors. So is there like a registrar of contractors, roofing license, an insulation, drywall, you know, general contractor's license? It also is a good collection tool, because sometimes those like registrar of contractors will have where you can file a complaint for not paying their bills. That's a quick trigger thing, because most of the time they're never going to buy from you again. But if you're at that collection mode, it might not matter. And I know this is about credit applications, but if we can get a few tips that way too, I always enjoy sharing that information. So if you're able to get a registrar of contractor, make sure their license is in good standing, and you can also use it as a collection tool. I want to know if they own or lease their real estate. If they lease, they can be gone a little quicker than if they own. It takes them, at least the building's still there, and I know they still own that. It gives me another venue. It also gives me an opportunity to ask for a UCC filing, even if I'm behind the bank. Yeah, sometimes banks mess up and I get first position, but if things go wrong, I might be able to slide in there with that UCC filing. Everything I do on the credit app is geared to, I know I sound like this dark side, you know, everybody's always going to be out to you know, get me kind of person. But this is the world we live in, that this credit application becomes really important once things go sideways. And then bank and trade references. I don't expect banks to respond to me for sending something out. They're going to charge $35, which is, again, the AI piece I really like, or through credit reports. If I pull a credit report, I can make a decision very quickly, depending on how much money they're asking for. Waiting for a bank, forget it. And then I want to see like creditors. I want to see who they're buying from. If I don't see at least one of my competitors on there, I'm going to wonder, okay, who cut them off? Because that's my first inclination as a credit person. Who cut them off? Why are they here? My salesmen think it's because they're charming. I see things different. So I want to see those like creditors, and I want to see at least one bank. Then I can go back to my credit report and I can look and see, all right, what other banks are they dealing with? Did they get a line of credit somewhere other than this bank? Did they file a UCC, finance something through a leasing company? If something goes wrong, I want as many places to serve my judgment garnishment, as many bank accounts as I can get my hands on. I also don't want to have to, going through a process where pulling a credit or pulling a credit report on somebody, I don't want to have to wait on somebody else's credit department. I know, Pam, I think that was you that had said, yeah, sometimes you're waiting a long time for a trade reference to come back. So on trade references, you know, we all see them come through. It's like second request, third request, they're time consuming, and you're really waiting for someone else's credit department to help you get your business. I want to push that through on a credit report as quickly as I can. So Dave, hit it. And then a couple more bits I want to know about. I want to know who pays the bills. I want the accounts payable, contact name, email, phone number. I want to know, are they tax exempt? Do I need I want to reserve that right for a financial statement. You know, I may ask for it in the credit app, I may not, depending on how much space I want to use up on that credit application. And I may never ask them for a financial statement on a $10,000 line, but if we're talking about six figures, I might want to take a peek under the hood and see what their financial statements look like. And then a word about purchase orders. I know we all put that on our credit application. Do you require a PO? I don't have a problem if you require a PO. I don't want to be responsible for who can be on that authorized purchaser list. I like to put some verbiage in there that it's right on there. If PO is required, my company's not liable to keep that up, maintain it, or check it. That takes a lot of responsibility on you. And typically what you see is, yeah, we require POs and Fred and Dave are the people to buy. Well, people are much more transient these days. Fred and Dave may not be there. And then I can't keep up. I can barely keep up with who works at my company. I certainly can't keep up with all the companies we sell to. So you might consider putting something like that on there and, you know, that no liability clause. Hit it, Dave. Now let's get to the fine print, and otherwise known as the terms and conditions. So terms and conditions are tricky. Every company has to decide what's important to them. And I think we probably have anywhere from 15 to 24 on any credit application that I've worked on. And most of them evolve over time. If you haven't looked at your terms and conditions lately, please take an opportunity in the next few days to pull those out and really read through them. If you haven't read through them in a while, look and make sure they're still relevant. You know, they do have some things that, you know, have to grow and change. And there's a couple things that happened in the past few years, like the pandemic, that really made a lot of people go back and look at what those terms and conditions are. But a few of them are addressing terms on there. While you don't have to be specific about your terms, you do want to be able to just have a quick reference to what that looks like, and then your verbiage for your ability to change your terms with or without notice. I don't owe you, I don't want to have to formally send something to you and get a sign off every time we do something on the account. So I want to make sure I buffer that as much as I can. And then interest, I want to address that up front, and I want to address what the percentages are. And interest falls under usury laws. So you want to make sure when you're doing that, that you're not violating your state or the states that you're working in. I had one company that they're like, we're just going to do 5% interest. Like, you're going to get slapped with some big fines. So let's back that down. I know that a lot of us think we can make our own rules because it's our own company, but you still have to abide by the laws that are out there. So be careful on charging interest and make sure that it's in accordance with your state. The venue, I like the venue and jurisdiction and choice of law provisions. I want to be able to sue where I want to sue. So typically it's, if I want to make it difficult for someone, even I might have sold them in Utah, but I'm based out of South Carolina. If my company is incorporated in South Carolina, I can reserve the right to sue under South Carolina state law. And, you know, I'm going to sue in Greenville County, South Carolina. So if you're in Utah, that means you have to travel to me. Now, does that happen? Very, very rare. What they'll do is go back to their attorney and say, this is going to create a hardship. They sold here. But now I've made them work a little bit, because if they don't show up, that's a whole nother, you know, default situation. But this allows me to at least get in front of them, and another opportunity for us to kind of work through some things. But I always want to reserve that, especially for arbitration. I keep trying to change the slide myself, Dave. Can you change that? It's a realizing I have no power over here. We also want to talk about attorney's fees. Some of the things that come up, like reasonable, can be a double-edged sword. So what may be reasonable in one part of the country might not be reasonable in another. So if I'm suing someone in, you know, Beaufunk, Georgia, and I bring my attorney from Atlanta over, and my attorney's $500 an hour, but in Beaufunk, Georgia, they run about $200 an hour, he might, you know, the judge might look at it and go, yeah, darling, no, which I wish I could say never happened to me, but absolutely did when the judge told me, darling, your high-priced attorney is not our problem. So reasonable is subjective to the judge's mood of the day. So you might want to back into considering percentages, and that kind of ties it in and ties their hands a little bit. And then generally no fees can be included unless you actually put that out there. People have to agree beforehand before you can just back into doing something to them. You have to agree to interest. They have to agree to pay attorney's fees. You have to put that up. It's just like with credit card surcharges. You've got to tell people in advance. You can't wait till after they did the transaction. Guarantees, if you want to do like a third party, how you posture that, whether it's a separate document or you built it in, make sure that they're two very clear, distinct, if they're on the same page, signing lines. And then dispute and warranty. Those are a couple of things that if you're a distributor, hey, we drop and go. I'm not warranting anything beyond what the manufacturer's warranty. You just want to make sure that's very clear to your customer. And then not putting something, saying reasonable amount to let know there was damage or if there was any kind of a dispute on an invoice or a delivery. I like 5 days, which sounds really tight, but what's typically happened, like say you have a load of windows that went out and somebody unloads it, puts it in their warehouse, the customer's not taking it or doesn't use it for 6 months. Bob backs into the windows with a forklift, doesn't say anything because he doesn't want to get in trouble because this is the 3rd time he's done it. And when they go to unwrap it 6 months later, now you have a claim coming at you. So you want to tie that in. I don't know what happened at your warehouse in the last 6 months. So you want to tie some tight time frames on that. And I realize that everything we do is a business decision if we alter from it, but at least set yourself up for success by having those things outlined in advance. And then execution of your credit app, make sure that you get whoever's signing it to print their name. Most people's signatures look like chicken scratch, so capturing that information is really good. And then making sure that it's signed by someone who has, even if you can't track down the owner or the president or somebody with a bigger title, all you have to have is a parent authority. So if you've been dealing with me for months and I've been the face of the company and you've been talking to me, you should have an expectation that my signature is enough. Hit it, Dave.
Got it.
Okay, little bit more, and these are some questions that usually come up as we're talking through credit applications. Customer claims they closed their account or removed their personal guarantee. I want to put language in there that addresses and no hallway conversations. Don't mention it to my salesman on a job site somewhere where it's, well, I told Fred, and if he didn't tell you, it's like, no, you needed to let us know, whether it's an email, whether it's snail mail. There's that mechanism for how they go about closing their account or rescinding a personal guarantee. You want flexibility the same way that you do with your terms, with increasing or decreasing the credit limits. Unfortunately, a lot of people like to put out, hey, welcome to our company. We've opened your account. Here's your account number, and here's your $25,000 line. And then 10 years later, they never look back. They've never given that another thought. Unfortunately, their account's grown with you over the years, and now maybe they're at 200,000 as their credit line, and things didn't go well. You find yourself in court. They produce this letter. They've never had anything come back to say, hey, we increased this. This is what happened over the years. And the judge says, well, their attorney basically tells the judge, listen, the expectation was this was our credit line. You should have held us to it. You never told us you increased it, even though, as we all know, the other side of that is they're begging you to release orders. So be careful what you put in writing. I like a good generic welcome to our company letter. Hey, we might be opening you at this. However, and put in some verbiage that however, as your account grows with us, this may or may increase or decrease. So you can definitely put some buffers in there. Anytime a customer changes their name or that the company name at all, I want a new credit app because I'm not sure what's going on at their end. That usually means they've had a shakeup as far as the legality of the company. Indemnity clause, I call it a throwaway clause because if I was somebody, I wouldn't sign an indemnity clause for somebody else. However, I want to lock that down where as a delivery company, as a dealer, a distributor, I'm drop and go. I don't care if somebody else ran over the porta potty and knocked it over and now we're all sharing in the cost of that. Just what I did. If my guy ran over Mabel's mailbox, then we will pay for Mabel's mailbox. But that's where it stops. I don't want to indemnify the whole job site. I alluded to the pandemic and how some of that language changed. It used to be just force majeure, and now it's turned into pandemic, supply chain, labor. What we saw during the pandemic when those were big issues going on is owners still holding contractors accountable, even though it's like, look, I would love to build your project. I just can't get any materials. So that caused a lot of contractors to get back charged, and it got very unkind. We're all in this together at the beginning of the pandemic got really ugly as it dragged on. So you saw a lot of contracts and credit applications be changed to include pandemic, supply chain, labor, acts of God, acts of nature. They became a paragraph that was one sentence, became 3 sentences long. And then specific language for credit card fees. I would just address that as you go. And if you're even thinking about it, I would put that in your payment section where you reserve the right, where you may or may not charge a surcharge. So I know I've kind of booked along pretty fast so far. Unfortunately, I talk fast. I should have let everybody know when we started out, if you have any questions or comments or want to jump in and share some of your experiences, just pop into that chat box or get Dave's attention, and he'll kind of give me the, hey, wrap it up, and, we can pop in and make sure we get anything you want to talk about addressed. You might want to hit that too, Dave.
Toot, yeah.
Just hit that button.
Yeah.
There we go. Let's talk internal pitfalls. So we already talked about don't write the credit limit on the credit application. With AI, that makes it easy because you can't get your hands on it. But with those applications in front of you, it's definitely easy. I mean, I grew up doing that, so it took a lot for me to break that habit. Always make sure you get a physical address. You want to make sure that you're able to track this company down. And then when you're getting a personal guarantee, please make sure that they're not putting their title under it, because the argument comes back as, well, I was signing on behalf of the company and not truly a personal guarantee. Hit it, Dave. All right, so this was my favorite piece of advice from an attorney when I had a credit application that was not spectacular. It was not tragic, but it was not spectacular. And he said, Band-Aids don't make up for a bad credit application or a personal guarantee with loopholes. And some of the most common Band-Aids that are out there, Dave hit it. I keep wanting to grab that, so I have to think. Popular joint checks and mechanics liens. I mean, we get notorious about how to get creative for increasing that line or kind of getting around some things. And I want to take this opportunity to remind everybody what you already know. Joint checks only work if they actually get issued. And depending on the verbiage in them, they may or may not work in your favor. So if these two are, throwing down on the job site and everybody's mad at everybody else, I still want that mechanism to kind of circumvent my customer and get that check cut right from whoever's holding the purse strings. So be careful what's in your joint check agreement and how that's worded. And then mechanics liens, a lot of times we make the mistake of increasing our exposure because we think, well, I have lien rights. And while they're all of these things are nice layers of comfort, nothing's absolute. If a mechanics lien was able to make me whole with the cost of everything that I had to put in it with the attorney or the lien service or all of the filings, the amount I carried it, I would love it. I'm still grateful for it. Don't get me wrong. I still use it. I'm still grateful. Unfortunately, it's not a substitute for making sure that we got all of the information that we needed up front. Hit it, Dave. Okay, so we talked about 2 parts of your app. There's the aesthetics piece of it, how it looks to your customer, and then there's everything else, which is the wording and the fine print. Hit it, Dave. So this is an example of 2 credit apps. I'm not in love with either one of them. I'm not advocating. These are just 2 examples of what we typically see in our industry. And I cleaned a couple of the one on the right up quite a bit because it still had fax number on it and some things like that. But when you look at it, they're still a little overwhelming to look at. There's really no way to get some of them any smaller, but if you can lay them out in a way, I like the boxed in version on the left better than the freestyle on the right. The thing that I like about AI is that, so right now, let me kind of back up. 60% of credit managers in our industry are over 60 years old now. And so we're in that boomer generation getting ready to retire. And what legacy or what you're leaving behind for your company. On the flip side of that, younger generations, there's trying to get them into our industry. First, tell them they're going to work in credit and collections and they're going to work in the building and construction industry. It's a hard no. So only 10% of young professionals or younger generations coming into the workforce that are even remotely interested in credit and collections, only 10%, which is, I think it was down from 22%, if I remember the statistics right, 22% 10 years ago. So in 10 years, we've lost 12% of our ground, which is not great for those of us who are like, well, I was going to retire in the next 5 to 10 years or 5 years or 2 years or whatever. So they're not looking at this transactional paper trail. They're that generation that grew up holding, I think they came out of the womb holding these things. And so they'll get on there, click the link, they'll fill out a credit application and nothing flat. If I take something like this out to a job site and my salesman hands it to a customer, I don't know who has a typewriter anymore. I don't think I've seen that in about 15, 20 years. Then you're left with somebody filling it out. And penmanship, since texting and email and computers have come out, penmanship has gone by the wayside. I sometimes can't even read my own notes, and I wrote them. So when you get credit apps back, I know those of you that have seen these, it looks like someone took a crayon in their toes and wrote it, and it's hard to decipher. So I like the clean aesthetic look of that whole AI process. Dave, can you hit that for me?
Yep.
Okay, so before I continue on my rant, I wanted to back up to the authorization release, and that's what you saw in that fine print at the bottom. And so typically everybody asks for that a little bit bigger. So I wanted to put that in a way that was easier for everyone to read and make sure that you are getting permission to pull those bank and credit reports and things. Okay, Dave, you can hit it now. Thank you. So now let's talk a little bit about making yourself easy to do business with. So we kind of circled back around to a little bit of what Dave was talking about earlier with how do we do more with less, because you can't out hire what you need for the work. And then younger generations aren't excited about that transactional work. Plus, you've got customers who are now trained by Amazon and your big box stores, the big orange one and the big blue one. And their processes, literally, I can drink a cup of coffee and have a credit line set up at Home Depot by the time I finish that cup of coffee. Their process is that slick, that fast, and that good. And I think 1 out of 10 gets kicked back, and they call them and say, here's what I need, and then they get it resolved. So that's what you're competing against, and that's the expectation that your customers have, because they're shopping in those places. So you've got this instant gratification thing. So if it's taking you 7 days to, because I think 60 hours is 7, you're looking at 7 days. So as you're going through and you're looking at how your processes are, make yourself easy to do business with. Is your credit application on your website? Is it PDF fillable? Can somebody go in and fill it out? Does it offer a signature spot? And then can your salesman send a link? Can you send a link to a customer? Because typically, whoever you're giving it to might be the one filling it out. It's got to go to somebody else. And then with that link, it comes right back into your office. So I'm not waiting for my salesman to circle back, pick it up, somebody drop it off, mail it in. God forbid you're still faxing, scanning at the very least. But you've got some things that are working in your favor and able to expedite. Hit it, Dave. And then continuing that evolution a little bit. I really like that automated process. Can I leverage credit data? Can I utilize credit reports? Our industry is notoriously cheap for buying or submitting credit data, which is counterintuitive because that's what we're all looking for to make our decisions, but yet we're a little slow to do that. And then turnaround time. If you're honest about how long it takes with your process, are you one of those 6 levels? $50,000 line takes, now I've got to run it up to this manager and this manager, and here's the level of authority that we have. Is there a way we can simplify this and make it better? Because do we really need the president of our company to make every $10,000 decision? That tells me we either have micromanagers or we have the wrong people in place. So how do we streamline this? And then how do we leverage software to be able to make this job better, easier, more efficient. Because as a credit person, I want to be with my salesmen and with my customers, getting those connections, getting those relationships. And credit can do a lot more for sales and increasing profit than what we get credit for. Are you archiving your stuff digitally? I am not a fan of paper. And I mean, I grew up in a generation of faxes and the D&B book where you had to, look it up, the giant book, and flip, look for the name. And if I can acclimate and grow and do like a digital filing cabinet, whether it's on a T drive, whether it's in software, it's no matter where I am, no matter where I travel, I can grab it without having to call the office and say, listen, can you go pull this file? Can you tell me what you see? So now I've made it much more robust and easier to deal with. And then having a process for reviewing accounts. Dave talked about, I kind of chuckled when he said, reviewing the accounts yearly. Most of us hope to get our accounts reviewed once a year and put a mechanism in for that so that we can stay on top of it. Credit is not a set it and forget it type of thing. I want to go back someone that maybe I sold to for 10 years. They've been great. And if I'm not looking at them every year, I don't know who my next bankruptcy is going to be. And for those of us that survived the late 90s, the 2000s, when all of those economic situations occurred, they were not fun years. And you get held accountable for, how did you not know this was happening? It's like, well, I can only work with so much. We've got this kind of work. This is what's coming in. How can I process this better? So anything that we can do to create triggers. I love the idea of knowing before. If I'm only reviewing an account once a year because that's how they came up in the queue, but if I'm getting real-time data, that's very cool to me, because now I can do more. I can do more with that. I can do more for my company, and I can help stem some losses. Hit it, Dave. E-signatures have come up as a big topic. And so one of the things that always comes up from the field is, well, I don't think that the e-signature is going to hold up in court. I don't think it's legal. So I wanted to make sure we put something in here about the e-sign act. A credit manager friend of mine out in Colorado called, and she said, look, our attorney's pushing back on us because he's really pushing us to not use automation and to not get like PDF fillable e-signatures. And I'm like, well, DocuSign's been around forever now. And if my mortgage company, and they put you through the ringer, if it's good enough for them, then why is your attorney backing up? And so we kind of went through, and that's where, I went to Dave and I said, hey, give me a little bit more about how you guys backed into this. And then this e-sign act was something that didn't get a lot of publicity, but I think it's worth knowing as a way to be able to come back and push back on people, especially in your organization, maybe some traditionalists or boomers that are not enamored with technology. This was a nice thing to have in your back pocket. Hit it, Dave. You're in the bottom corner of my screen, so I keep looking down at you. Okay, so wrapping it up, and then we'll open it up for questions if anybody has anything, but verify your credit app and your signatures. And you guys can read these, but make sure you get that application properly executed. Make sure it's signed. I know some people have sent them back to me where nobody signed it, or it looked like it was an X or a thumbprint or something. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do with that. Make sure that you've given yourself every opportunity to secure your company. So if there's something you need to have in your terms and conditions, build that in. It doesn't have to be super long. You can be super concise with it too. So, and then things always change. So like I said before, credit is not a set it and forget it thing. So make sure that you're revisiting those things. Hit it, Dave.
Double hit it.
All right. So any questions? All right.
If you've got one, feel free to unmute yourself, and then you can ask directly to Thea.
Well, I guess we covered everything pretty well, or they're like, man, they got to get to lunch or something. So Hungry, let's wrap it up.
Oh, no, no, no.
There were some questions in the chat about the digital
Yeah.
signature.
Okay, Dave, do you
Right.
want to kind of peek at those? I'm going to let you drive.
Yeah.
since I
Yeah,
don't
so
know.
let's start at the top here. So I'm just seeing these. What are your thoughts on a witness signature along with the personal guarantee signature? I have customers in court stating they did not sign the personal.
Mm.
So are we talking an e-signature or when you're rocking paper and they're saying, oh, hey, I didn't sign that?
No, the customer filled it out manually. He signed it. He signed the personal. He signed the terms and conditions. We're now suing him on the personal, and he's stating that he didn't sign it. So we went back and we took copies of his checks, copies of other documents we had that he signed, and submitted those. And it doesn't come up often, but I have had a couple customers who've come back and said, "Oh, I didn't sign that."
Yeah, I've had that same experience in court. And of course, the attorney's always like, you should always get a witness, get it notarized. It's like, honey, I appreciate what you're saying. And in a perfect world, I would.
Right.
But I'm lucky this guy signed it on the front of his truck. So get off my back, okay?
Yeah, it's hard to, I just didn't know what your thoughts were on it because, again, it doesn't come up very often. It's only come up a couple times, but we have thought about it.
Yeah, I'm with you. It comes up just often enough where it's like, is it worth putting? It's the 80-20 rule. So when it's come up, everybody talks about we should do this, we should do that. I love the idea of just like a witness signature, whether it's your salesman's signature, but I've had that situation come up where it's like, well, it's the salesman. He could have signed it and then signed his name. It's like, oh, for the love of God, yes.
Yeah, they can argue everything.
Yeah. It's like, honey, yeah, that's really what we're doing just for your $10,000 account.
Right.
I exactly what you're doing. Same kind of thing where it's you just kind of here's all the evidence and it's like, look, get your driver's license out and let's compare this against the two. Do we need to drag a handwriting witness in here? And by the way, when I kick your booty in court, you're going to pay for him too.
Right.
I think you're handling it as best you can.
I'm curious, Margaret, did the guarantor actually submit an SSN when they signed the document? Was that on there as well?
You know what? I would have to go back and look, to be honest. And yeah, I think he did. I think he submitted all of his personal information as part of our application, like the ones that were shown on the screen. Like I said, we just went back and took copies of his checks because it's the same exact signature.
Right. One of the ways that we actually help customers here is that we'll do a one-time passcode verification of the email address that they're using to submit their application. So suddenly the guarantor has to prove that he didn't have control of his own email address, had lost control of that, lost control of his SSN when he was making the signature. And we can actually position him physically, whoever is completing the application. So if he's in the right city and state as this person lives, those are just additional layers that you can feed into that argument that you're making, that it's most likely that this is actually the person who did sign the document.
Yeah,
so I think it's really about like getting the layers to use as part of your.
Because again, it doesn't come up often, but when it does, you have to go back and try to find. And we actually, on this customer, we were lucky because we have his same signature on his company's bankruptcy.
Oh my God.
So I just thought I'd ask because this case was pretty easy to solve, but sometimes it's not. So.
No, but that was one of the things that came up why I wanted to include the whole e-sign. Because the whole thing of, well, someone could have used my computer. It's like, okay, now you're just digging a huge hole for yourself. So what you're telling me is somebody got on your computer at your house or at your office and signed in as you and did it. So I love the idea that IP addresses are a little, just one more layer to track back to. But God, I think we've all had that situation. So bummer. But his bankruptcy, that's just beauty, where he's like, yeah, those signatures are identical.
Right?
Go, got it.
Yeah, it's pretty blatant. So
Dave, do we have some other questions?
Yeah, we've got a kind of connected one from Marshall. We may have covered this, Marshall. Does that kind of cover the angle of your question around validation on signatures?
Yes, I was just thinking, a lot of times you can use your finger or a pencil, electronic pencil or whatever to, put your signature in. But, more and more whenever we're being asked to sign documents, you type your name in and then the software populates the signature for you. So I didn't know if there's any way to build security around that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the same answer in that it's all about layers. And so the couple of pieces we mentioned already are really helpful in proving that there's control of the mailbox that's owned by that person. The verification of the SSN, making sure that the name of the person who's signing matches the SSN, and both of those things are held by the federal government and match what's on record. It's also possible to add in a document ID check. So you can actually add in, this is a feature on our platform and a few others as well, the ability to mandate that you capture a document. So if this is something you're really concerned about, what you can do is require that your customer will actually submit an ID into the system so that you've got that document as well, which is another thing that the signer is proving that they have. So you're proving that you've got things that they know and things that they have, which is a pretty common concept in the legal world and information security more generally, that you want to be able to prove identity. You do it by proving things they know and things they have is really the best way to do that.
Perfect. Sometimes you get a purchaser that's in a rush and they like to just rush through the application there, and so
Put a name. Yeah,
exactly.
sure.
Those are always the ones that are going to end up going bad, because anytime you cut corners, it's like, God, I knew this was going to bite me.
Everybody's a procrastinator.
Yeah, that's true. Anything else, Dave, or did we clear everything up?
That's it from the comments section, but unless anybody on the line has got one, we could probably end with a few thanks. I want to thank Thea for taking us through the presentation, everybody for joining, and also the association, NBMDA and AFCD, for setting up the webinar and organizing this for us. We, Nuvo, are actually going to be out at the event in Colorado Springs, November 6th. So if you're also going to be there, we'd love to see you in person. We typically go out to these things with a custom demo for every attending customer, where we actually pre-configure an application for your business. So we'd love to have you stop by the booth and pay us a visit and say hello. Great. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.